Welcome back to the channel. So last year I was asked to create a custom Tamiya lunchbox for my godson, and we went with a Huggy Wuggy theme, and we came out with Poppy's lunchbox. This year it was decided he wants a TT02B for Buzz Lightyear. So we've got the body pretty much finished. Only thing I've got to do is the stickers on the end plate, which I'm not going to put on until I've got everything mounted, so I can make sure the stickers are sat straight. So in this video we're going to get the chassis built. So the first step is to get the prop shaft sorted and the front diff. Now it's going to be a stock build apart from the fact that we're going to be fitting bearings. So there we go, there's the prop shaft installed and spur gear. So you've got a retaining pin that slots through the drive cup in there, locked into the collar, locked into the spur gear, and 4 1150 bearings. One there, one there, one there, and there's one under the cap there. That's that, all in, nice and smooth. Now let's get the diff sorted for the front. The one thing to remember, and it does mention it in the manual, but when you're cutting the gears off the sprues, you need to make sure that there's no bits of sprue left, like on here. That one's nice and flush. So just make sure you cut it off, nice and flush. There we go, no plastic sticking out. Right, so there's a front diff all built up. So remember to put the anti-wear grease on. And when you do, make sure you put it on the rear faces as well of all the gears. Don't forget to drop it on the sort of centre piece that holds the gears. And then what I like to do is just drop 2 drive cups in. Just make sure everything spins nicely, doesn't catch, just in case there's any plastic left on any of the gears, like I said earlier. As long as it all moves nice and smooth, we can then fit it in the chassis. Now one of the things to remember when you're fitting it in the chassis is pay attention to which side the actual gear goes. So there's the rear of the chassis where the spur gear is, and there's the front, so you're going to want it this side. Okay, now we're just going to make sure we get some grease on the gears. Also fitted some 1280 bearings either side, just help that spin nicer. We're going to drop some grease on the gears and get the diff casing on. So that's the front diff housing on. Now it also says to put some of the anti-wear grease along the seam of the diff housing, just to stop any dirt and dust getting in there. Now we need to repeat the process for the rear, get the rear diff built up, get the rear diff fitted, and then we can move on to the motor and the pinion. So the rear diff all built up. Once again, just make sure everything's nice and smooth, everything rotates okay. 1280 bearings installed either side. Now to fit it into the chassis, remember, as I say, double check which way around it goes. So this side, the diff went in that way with the gear down there. The rear, it goes in that way. So what happens if you do end up putting them in wrong? One of 2 things. If they're the opposite way around, so this one down here, this one up here, it's going to go forwards when you want it to go backwards. Or if you put both of these gears on the same side, whether it be here or here, the wheels are going to want to go in opposite directions. So you might not notice it if you use it in the air, but as soon as you put it on the ground, both wheels are going to want to pull it either way, and it won't work. So now let's get the grease on the gears and get the diff cover on. Right, so what I've actually done is we're using the 17 tooth pinion. So we're going with the 17 tooth holes. Just about see it there. But I've also added some Loctite to the motor screws and to the grub screw on the pinion. Now the pinion has got to be 10mm from the end of the plate to the end of the pinion. So set the caliper up. Just knit this up a little bit so it's a bit more rigid on the motor. And then we just check. So we've got to come out a bit more. And there we go. We've got 10mm from the end of the pinion and the end of the plate. Now we get this in the chassis. So there we go. There's a motor all bolted in. So you've got 2 screws underneath that hold the motor mount. So just double check that your mesh is actually good and that you've used the right holes. Don't want to be using the wrong one. Now we can get the motor cover and spur gear cover on, and the battery strap post as well. The next step is to get the lower rear arms fitted. Now it says the first thing to do is to drop these little pieces in the chassis. Now you can, but if they fall out while you're trying to fit this part, because on there will be 2 screws, and you end up losing them, you're going to have a bad day. So I'd suggest fit this first, then slot those pieces in after. So now that's that piece fitted, you can then take the little top hat looking pieces, slot them in the chassis, put your arms on. They're both same, so it doesn't matter which side they go. Put your shock mounting, needs to be facing the rear. Take the retaining pin, slide it through. Get one started, and the other. Should just be able to slide it in place then. Push it down until it's flush with that bracket there. That's the arms in. Now we need to stop that pin from falling out by fitting this piece here. It's held on with these 3 screws, which you may be able to see. You've got 2 different sizes. There you go. So the longer one goes in the centre, 2 shorter ones go in the outside of those 3 holes there, and it mounts on just on there. Let's get that fitted. There we go. The arms fitted now completely, nice and solid. They're not going anywhere. The retaining bracket is on. One 3x10mm to the centre there, and the 3 bolts on the bottom. As I say, short one, long one, short one. Right, so next step, start getting the front arms on, at least the bottom ones. So it says about adding a bit of anti-wear grease on those and fitting that on there. So we're going to fit this first, then we're going to add the little spacers or whatever they are. That's that bracket fitted. Once again, we've got a long screw in the middle, short one either side. I'm going to use a cocktail stick to put the bit of the grease on there to hold them in place. Get them in there, and then we get the arms and the retaining clip in. So I found the easiest way with the little clips to stop them falling off is put the pin through first, then slide the clips over, and then you can pull it back just enough to slide the arm in, on both sides, then push a pin all the way through. Now it doesn't matter left or right which one you use, as long as the shock mounts are facing the front of the car. Once you've got the pin slid in, the arms are secure. Now we're on to the next step, and that is getting the front bumper on and this little bracket using 3 10mm screws. That's the front bumper fitted and the arms on, as I say, shock mounts at the front and on the rear, shock mounts facing the rear. So the next step is the front shock towers. So we're going to use C5, and as it says, keep an eye on which direction the parts are going. So you're going to have 2 lines on there, and they're going to be facing out of the car, and the other end is what goes on the shock tower. Now bear in mind there are 2 types of step screw with this. As you can see, you've got a different length of shoulder on the 2, and we're going to be using the shorter ones, which are in a different bag to the longer ones. There we go, that's them mounted. As I say, that side on the bracket is where the lines go, and they face out, as opposed to being there and there. To attach this on the chassis, you've got 3 countersunk screws, again different lengths. You've got the longer black one and the shorter silver one. So again, long one in the middle, shorter ones on the outside. There we have the shock tower and the arms mounted. As you can see, longer screw in the middle, shorter one on the outside. No need to over tighten them, you're going into pretty soft plastic, and you can fairly easily strip the thread out of it. The next step, we're going to get the front hubs built up. So we're going to need 2 hubs, 2 of the carriers, 2 of the output drives, 2 of the ball joints, 4 kingpins, and 2 bearings, but we're going to skip ahead a little bit, put the extra bearing in. We're just going to use a body pin just to hold the drive cup, stop it falling out. A quick tip for the ball joints, just remember they need to be opposites. So if you end up putting one in there and then you end up putting one in there, you can have 2 that look the same, going to be no good. So you want one either side. So with regards to the hubs, what you're going to want to do is make sure with the carrier that the bit sticking out is the same side as the ball joint. So we've got the bearing in there and the body pin, just stop it falling out. I found the easiest thing to do is just drop one of the screws in just a little bit, and then that way you can put a bit of grease on the other kingpin and then screw it into place, and then you can remove that one, put a bit of grease on it, and then screw it back in. There we go. I'm going to make sure we've got the screws bolted down nice and tight. A bit of grease on the shoulders. That's one side done. Now we've just got to repeat the same for the other side. So there we have the 2 front hubs complete. So as I say, just bear in mind that you want the bit sticking up on the same side as the ball joint, and also if you look, there's a little ridge on there, and that's got to be same side as the ball joint as well, just in case you end up mixing the parts up and putting this bracket on this hub and it's upside down and back to front. Little tip there. Next step, we're going to get the drive shaft fitted in the front. Now it says about using the O-rings. Now they are to scale on there. You've got 2 different sizes of black O-ring in the packet. The other ones are a lot smaller, and they're used for the shocks, so don't get confused with them. You need the 2 black O-rings, 2 bolts to hold the arms in, 2 step screws, output drive cups, the 2 drive shafts, and a bit of grease. There's the front arms, drive shafts, all on, nice and smooth. Now we've got to do the same on the rear. Next step, get the rear shock tower put together with the arms, as so. There we go. Bit of grease on the step screws. And I'm going to fix it onto the chassis. Now you've got a 12mm for the centre and then 10mm either side. That's pretty easy to tell the difference between the screws. Longer one's black, shorter one's silver. So let's get a shock tower on the chassis. All fitted. Now time to get the rear hubs and drive shafts on. Much the same as the other ones. So output cup, O-ring, bit of grease on the drive shafts, and then the hub with the output cup on it as well. Now we're going to get the rear hubs on. Now we've got the rear shock tower on. That should finish the hubs ready to move on to the next step. Right, that's one side done. There's a couple of things to note. You can see there the top bracket is actually off centre. And make sure the bracket is facing the rear of the car so you don't get them mixed up, because otherwise, as you can see, that one will be in the way of the arm. This is also where the longer step screws come into play compared to the shorter ones, and they fix through into the arm. Right, so that's the rear hubs all fitted, suspension arms are on. Next thing we've got to do is the shocks. Right, so the next thing we're going to do is make a start on the first shock. This one's going to be one of the front ones because it's one of the shortest. Might need some tissue for this one, just because they can be quite messy building the oil shocks up. So the first thing we're going to do is take the two smaller O-rings and take the cap, small cap out of the two, the one without the mount on it, and the shock body itself. A little bit of damp oil on the O-rings, seat them inside there, and then put the cap on. But you only want it on loose. So we're not going to tighten that fully down because we don't want it to bind up, because now we've got to put the rod in. So now we've got the rod and the rod end on. Now I need to tighten it up. You're either going to need some pliers without teeth, or you can use normal pliers and put some cardboard or something between them, just so you can grip the shaft without it getting damaged. Now we've got that tightened up, we can actually tighten the cap up, the small cap. That still allows that to move okay. So the next step is to get the shock oil in. And this is where you might need the tissue. To begin with, you just top it up. And move the shock slowly up and down just to get rid of any air trapped under it. More oil in that. Repeat the process. Then wrap it in the tissue. Put it to the top. Then fit the green cap. Could do a bit more in there. What you want is the oil to overflow when you put the cap in. Just like that. We take the top cap, screw it on, clean up any excess oil. Should be a nice and smooth shock then. Next step, fit the spring. So obviously we're going to use a short spring out of the two. You can see the difference in there, pretty obvious. Take the short spring, slide it over the shock body, compress the spring, slide the little spacer on there, and that's it. One shock. Can be quite time consuming to do the shocks, but luckily I found an easy way to do it. Take yourself a box. Put all your bits in there. Don't forget the oil and the tissue because it might make a mess. Put them in. And then if you open it back up, you'll see, move all the rubbish out of the way. You've got the other three shocks built up. The rest of the bits are in there. I can't guarantee that'll work for you. It all depends what box you use and how many times you shake it. Now you also get some spacers to put on the shocks. I found with my TT02B that the back can sag quite a bit. So I'm actually going to use all three on the rear and on the front. And we might go for, we'll go for the biggest one on there. These can always be changed at a later date anyway. Now to fit these, you literally pull the spring down a bit and pop it on. And that's it. Makes that spring a little bit tighter. And so I'm actually going to fit all three on the rear because my TT02B sags quite a bit. That's all the spacers fitted. Makes the rear a lot stiffer. The front's a bit stiffer as well. Now we're going to get the shocks mounted to the chassis using the short step screws and the little black spacers. A little bit of grease around the step screw. Let's get them fitted. There we go, shocks fitted. That should be alright. And so they're quite heavy on the back, so I have found that my TT02B sags a little. so the extra spaces in there should help. We can always soften it up anyway by either moving the shock position or changing the spaces. Next step, we're going to get the steering on. Now we're not going to put no uprated steering on this or ball race steering on it. We're just going to go with stock. It can always be upgraded at a later date. So just a note when fitting the ball joints, or ball ends, whatever you want to call them. If you look, you've got a line on the one side and it sits slightly higher. So the balls go in the lower end without the line running to them. Make sure you get them both the right way around. There we go. The arms are fitted. These are nice and free. Make sure you don't over tighten this screw because you will start to bind up. Don't have it too loose that the screw can back out. Now we just got to try and pop the rods onto the ball connectors. And that's it. All nice and free. Now I need to get the bridge on, get the servo in, make sure that's centered and we're not far off finished. Into the electrics. We're going to go with a metal geared servo, nothing too fancy. A Fly Sky GR3E, as we're using a Absima CR3P remote. That'll be able to be bound up to that. And the factory supplied 1060 style Tamiya ESC. So we'll be fitting one of my switch adapters, providing the cable's long enough to get it in the stock place. I've already centered the servo on one of my other cars, because as I say, we need to bind this receiver to Blake's remote once that's done. So we've got the servo and the rest of the steering fitted. That's all done. So the next thing we're going to do is the speed controller. Now the normal switch won't mount in the original place, so that's where my switch mounts come in. But it's literally a case of sliding it in. And we've just got a clearance just there that the screws can pass through. That's easy enough done with either a pair of cutters or a little file. There we go, that's been filed. Now that will clear. The switch will sit flush in the mount. You can then fit it in the original spot, the two M2 screws. There we go, that's all mounted. Now we just need to fit it onto the car. Let's get that done and then we can secure the speed controller where we're going to keep it. There's the rest of the electrics in. So we've got the speed controller in, wires cable tied for now out of the way, and the receiver in as well. These can all be rerouted if needed, depending on how the body fits, because it is quite low at the front. But we should have enough room and stay clear of the prop shaft. Once we've got the body on and everything, and the battery in, the next step, we need to get the wheels on, get the spoiler mount on, we can start fitting the body bits. Now I've got the tyres mounted. The fronts were a bit more annoying to do than the rears because of being thinner, a little bit tighter, but they're on. So let's get them on the car. There we go, got the wheels fitted, spoiler mount fitted, body post fitted. One last thing to do, get these on. And there we have it, body on. One final touch to do, which is to get these on. We get them on now, we know how the wing's sitting, so we can make sure that they're level. There we go, last two stickers on. Pretty happy with how that one's turned out. Although we need to see what Blake thinks. Hopefully he likes it. We'll soon find out when he gets it for his birthday. If you enjoyed watching this build, consider subscribing, and we'll see what other custom jobs we can get up to. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.